Well, thank you all for inviting me, and thank you for joining us. And particular thanks to Nikki for setting up my presentation, particularly around the who are we working with. So whilst Nikki approached her topic from a coach perspective, I'm really going to focus on the parent's perspective. And particularly, I just want to talk a little bit around some of the complexity of parenting children involved in sport. And I say this often when I start presentations. I'm very biased in my representation towards parents, and that came sort of from conversations early on in my research when I talked to my own mum, and she said, it's tough being a parent and everyone's always telling you you're doing it all wrong. Don't come out and do research that just tells parents they're doing it wrong. And having joined the parenting journey myself, and I know Nikki has as well in the last couple of years, I'm even more adamant that we don't need to be telling parents what they're doing wrong. There's enough of that. And so I want to kind of present some of this from a parent's perspective and really try and highlight, why understanding the complexity allows you to then work maybe in a more positive or more effective manner with parents. So a few years ago, there was a video clip that went viral from a football match in Wales. I'm not going to play the clip, although it might start in a minute on its own. But in this clip, what you saw was that the young lad, the goalkeeper here, as the ball was coming towards him, he gets pushed to the ground by his dad, and the result of that was that it went all over Twitter, and it was proposed that this was the best dad or the worst dad, the ultimate pushy parent, and really that this was a representation of everything that was wrong with youth sport. And I must have got sent it, and I'm sure Nikki did actually. Anyone who works in youth sport will have been sent this clip hundreds of times within the first hour when it came on. But I decided to look into it a little bit more, or I was interested, so I thought I'd read a bit about it. And so when it was represented on the BBC, granted I didn't read every news outlet, so there may be bias here, but as the BBC represented it, first they started to talk a little bit about what the parents said, and the parents explanation makes perfect sense. He went over to talk to his son because he was a bit bored in goal. He didn't seem to be doing all that much, but then he was chatting to him. So as a parent, he's feeling a bit bad because he's distracted. His son, the ball's coming. He tries to give him a bit of a gentle encouragement to get back into the middle of the goal. He pushed him. He fell over. So that was the parents' explanation. We also have, the explanation of the coaches and the rest of the team. We're bent over laughing. We didn't even see the ball go in the net. We thought this was a funny situation, not out the coaching manual, but perfect timing. So we've got what's going on from a coaching or a club perspective. Oh, and importantly, the lads, the boy involved seemed to think it was okay. He was happy enough about it. However, because this got reported so widely on the media, because it got attracted so much attention and everyone was talking about how terrible it was, the video got sent to the FAW, and there's a code of conduct for parents, and this is against the code of conduct because the parents behaved inappropriately, and so consequently they had to investigate. And now my question is, from an outsider's perspective, looking in on this, we can see the video, we can see the clip as it's shared online. But do we really know what's going on? Until we fully understand everyone's perspectives, the parents, the child's, the coaches, do we know what's going on? And so my question to you as coaches or to researchers working within this space is, do we assume a lot about parental involvement in sport? And do we assume that we know more than we really do simply by looking at, particularly at competitions, the behaviours of parents? So why do I suggest that we might be making some assumptions here? Well, firstly, we know that, as Nikki articulated very nicely, young athletes, children, their experiences within sport, what they learn from sport, what they gain through their participation is largely influenced by the environment that they're in. It's not dictated by what a parent does or a coach does separately or what peers do. It's influenced by all of those different aspects interacting together. However, what parents do isn't simply a tick box of do these things and avoid these things. from a coach's perspective, I can dictate looking at you that these are things you should do and these are things you shouldn't. Actually, what a parent does is influenced by a whole range of factors as well. So what a child experiences is influenced by numerous factors, and a parent is one of those. But what a parent does and how a parent impacts on their child is influenced by numerous factors. So what is happening for parents? Well, lots. Lots, and especially when children are young, I'm going to say a lot of this is happening with not much sleep underpinning it as well. But maybe that's my own personal experience. But parenting is tough. Lots of coaches will be parents, and I'm sure as a parent or as a coach without kids, I'm sure you can appreciate that parenting is challenging. Parenting happens in an environment where we have very clear views on this is appropriate or this is inappropriate. Usually, as Nikki mentioned, based on our own beliefs around what a parent should or shouldn't do, usually based on how we were raised. My gut feel, and I think, I don't know if we have the evidence for it because it would be really hard to get it, but most parents want to do the right thing by their children. I don't think there's many parents who are intentionally going out into a sporting environment and thinking, I'm going to make this as awful an experience as I can for my child. So when coaches adopt a perspective that parents are doing things wrong, it often, at least within social media, gets communicated in a manner as if to imply that parents should just know better and that they're purposely doing things wrong. But anyone who knows a parent will know that they're trying to do things, with the best intention for their child. And so when we start to consider parenting behaviors, when we start to criticize or appraise them, simply based on observing what parents are doing, it's often with a limited understanding of what the intention of parenting behaviors were. What is it that the parent was trying to do through those actions? And definitely a lack of cultural appreciation. How parents parent, the impact of parenting behaviors, the purpose of parenting, and the goals of socializing your child vary depending on different cultures. And we definitely lack research in that area. And we will be influenced by our own experiences. And so when we've got parents, when we're trying to work with parents within youth sports settings, you've got to understand that they are under considerable amounts of pressure, that there's a lot of things that are happening for them, which they're trying to manage and cope with. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment, I'll try and bring a few of those ideas to life, all within tennis examples. Anyone who knows my research knows it tends to sit in that area because that's an area that I grew up with and am very familiar with. But firstly, we've talked about that idea of parenting being right and wrong, and this idea that most parents are probably trying to get it right. Anyone who does follow tennis will know that Andre Agassi had a very tough relationship with his father, and was raised in an environment where being successful in tennis was extremely important. When you look at the two of them, so this is Mike Agassi, his father, talking about his behaviors and reflecting on his behaviors in his own autobiography. And similarly, Andre Agassi reflecting on his father's behaviors in his autobiography. It becomes clear that even in a situation which really wasn't something that we would recommend as being positive to lead to, beneficial outcomes, and definitely didn't necessarily within Andre's case lead to positive outcomes, you can see that there's a recognition that it was underpinned by love, that there was a desire in the parenting to try and help Andre succeed. And yes, it didn't go in the way that we wanted, but understanding that emotional bond, understanding that natural desire of a parent, and that consequently the impact that might have on behaviors, is one of the places I would say you've got to start as a coach when thinking about parents. We also know that parents see things that we don't. So whether you're a coach or a sports psychology practitioner, we aren't there with the players all of the way through. So this is Rafael Nadal's mum talking in an interview about the experience of watching Nadal play. She talks about how emotional it is. She talks about how she gets frustrated when people make comments because she understands the stress, the injuries he's been through, how hard he's working, and nobody else sees them. So as a parent, parent, there's an emotional experience that comes from those shared experiences, which coaches and people on the outside don't necessarily see. And then we've also got this judgment of society. Now, this is a case that happened right back when I was doing my undergrad dissertation, my first research around parenting. And in this very tragic case, the father, to cope with the stress that he was experiencing when his children were competing in tennis, was drugging his opponents through putting things in their water bottles. One of those opponents was an adult and drove home and tragically crashed their car and died. And he, the father ended up in jail for manslaughter for 10 years. Now, that's obviously a very extreme case, one of those extreme cases that Nikki talks about, but it points a little bit towards how some of the stresses and the pressures that are placed on parents, both within and outside of sport, might start to impact on and influence what parents are doing. And so why have I shared that with you? Because what I'm trying to articulate is that whilst parents might have the very best intentions, and whilst parents might be going out in the hope of really developing positive experiences for their children, the actions of parents are not solely within their control. We cannot imply that parents are not influenced by other factors. And there's lots of different research that has started to articulate the influence that the competitive environment have, that our own beliefs and our own expectations and our knowledge, a number of those things that Nikki talked about, might have on our involvement. So when Nikki talked about, as a coach, the importance of knowing who your parents are, these are the aspects that I think are really important to know. Not only what are they hoping for, what are their goals for their child, but what environments are they coming from and how are those environments influencing them? If we unpack that a little more, we know that there's a big perception, for instance, among parents of what it is to be a good sport parent, an expectation that as a parent you might provide feedback, an expectation that you should engage in some degree of evaluation of a performance. And the environment that parents find themselves in, the culture, the different sports that their children are participating in, will influence what parents do. And so when we think of things, even things that are often articulated as great messages around parents, people love this one. It went around Twitter for years, it feels like, this idea that, whether your child wins or loses isn't an indication of you as a parent. However, we're going to hammer you as a parent if your child's not coachable, respectable, a great teammate, mentally tough, resilient, or trying their best. These are not innocent messages. These are messages within an environment which reinforce to parents that we are judging what you do, and that what you are producing in terms of how your son or your daughter behaves in that environment is directly down to you. And so you better get it right, because otherwise, you've done something wrong as a parent. So thinking about the culture and the environment we're creating and how that influences parents is really, really important. But also understanding what parents can and can't do is key. And this again talks to that, who are you working with? Not all parents are in dual parent families. You've got single parents with multiple children that they're trying to transport to different settings, different financial structure, backgrounds, different knowledges, different expectations, different personal experiences of sport. And all of those, this picture here is a picture from a study we did where the children told us what they wanted from their parents, and then we asked the parents if they could do it. And the parents articulated all these different factors which would prevent them being able to do what children wanted. And so as a coach, understanding what is it that's limiting parents and what is it that's impacting on their involvement is really, really key to developing positive relationships with them. And ultimately, why is that so important? That's all important because if we want parents to be able to help children achieve their sporting potential, develop positive psychosocial outcomes, and have positive experiences, then you as a coach play an important role in recognizing the pressures that parents are under, the demands they're being placed on, and you play an important role in creating a culture in which parents feel or are able to do what they want. So specifically, as a coach, what you need to first do is take some time to appreciate what are the demands that parents are experiencing, and is there anything that you can do to minimize some of those demands. The next thing you might want to consider, and this is adding on to what Nikki already talked about, is how can you help prepare parents for what's to come? One of the things I hear consistently from parents is, if I'd known the cost, if I'd known the time, I might have rethought how far down the journey we went. I raise that with coaches, and coaches go, yeah, but if we tell them in advance, well, then we'll lose them and they won't stay involved. But actually, wouldn't we rather have parents who knew what was to come and knew what was expected of them and what they were preparing for, than kind of tricking them into keeping their children involved? So as a coach, you can help parents anticipate that. You can help them to anticipate the experiences that they may have in competitions. Give parents some guidance around the strategies that may help them to cope with the emotions or the situations that they're encountering. But more importantly, you can really work with parents by creating what I like to term parent positive environments. So Nikki, these are very similar ideas to what she suggested. She suggested them from what a coach can do, and I'm reiterating them and saying that parents ask for these things too. You know, if you create an environment in which parents are seen as an asset, in which parents are welcomed and valued and respected, then it's going to be much easier for you as a coach to work with those parents and to see some positive outcomes. And there's a number of very simple strategies that you can do to try and create these environments: facilitating parent networks so that parents have support, encouraging reflection and learning, simply communicating with parents using all of those great strategies that Nikki shared, taking time to understand what's going for parents, and really importantly, providing opportunities to raise issues, for parents to raise issues and to be heard, not just to raise them and ignore them. All of these things which create an environment which welcome and value parents will allow you as a coach to work with them, and more importantly, potentially allow parents to be involved in a way that leads to the most positive outcomes for their children. So I'll conclude there by just stating that, you know, we understand, and hopefully through this very brief presentation, you've got a feeling that actually it's really difficult and challenging for parents at times, and it's very complicated. And as a coach or as a researcher working in this area, it's not as simple as just telling parents to do these things or to avoid these things, but instead we need to take a broader lens and understand that actually there is no roadmap to being successful within sport or being a successful sport parent. And as a coach, if you can create an environment which facilitates positive involvement from parents, then we're all at least moving in the same direction. And so that's everything from me.